Tatum African American Resource Center of the Toledo Lucas County Public Library proudly presents the Edrene Cole Oral History Project. This unique undertaking spotlights the Edrene Cole Collection, a compiled oral history of film and transcriptions. This special collection is named after the late Edrene Cole, a local historian and educator who devoted much of her life to documenting and sharing the stories of noteworthy Toledoans in the African American community. With the Oral History Project, the Tatum Center honors Cole's memory and continues her work. Join us and University of Toledo anthropology professor Dr. Willie McKether as Toledo's very own African Americans share the rich stories of their lives.
Hi, I'm Willie McKether. In this segment, we're pleased to welcome one of Toledo's favorite native sons, Mr. Michael J. Hollie. Mike has had a distinguished career in Toledo as a student athlete, as an entrepreneur in the insurance business, as a dedicated worker in the community, and as a noted R&B, jazz, and gospel artist. Mr. Hollie, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Mike, let's begin with some of your early life. Tell me when and where you were born.
I was born right here in Toledo, Ohio.
Okay.
I was born over Harry's Barbershop, which was my grandfather's barbershop. And my doctor was a Dr. Hart here in Toledo, which lived right down the street from where I was born. And I was not born in the hospital. It was right there.
Right there. Okay, Mike, I know also that both your mother, Lillian Hollie, as well as your grandparents, Claudine and Harry Wiley, shaped and influenced your early childhood. What did your grandparents mean to you?
Well, especially my grandmother, Claudia Wiley. She was more or less a catalyst of making things happen, you know. And I got my share of whoopings. And, you know, I think about that from the day now that the people that we have on this earth talking about, you know, spare the rod and all that. I bet you I didn't get a good 12 whoopings throughout my whole young life. But I did get them. If I needed them, I got them. And I can recall one time that she had just bought some brand new curtains, and from a gentleman that in the community that he sells them on time, and you get them. And it took her time to get these curtains. It wasn't that easy to just go up and buy them. She had to, you know, work with her money.
Sure.
And at the time, Ticky's was a big store downtown in Toledo, and just about all the mothers and stuff visited Ticky's on a Monday.
Okay.
This particular Monday, we had a dog named Dickie, at least I did. He was a Cocker Spaniel. He was not allowed no further than the kitchen door. You know, the front room, the living room, he could not go in there, and he would not. He'd go there and look, and he knew his responsibilities in the back of the house.
Sure.
So he left. At least my grandmother left and went downtown and told me to stay in the house till she got back. And I decided to, because a lot of my friends was outside playing football, and they said we needed one more player. So I looked around and I said, well, that dog's not going to come up front. So I went outside and played. And then I came in, and the curtains was just completely severed right across 4 pairs of curtains.
Oh, gosh. And
believe you, I looked at that and I said, oh, my God. And here she came home, and yes, right. I got killed. The dog, he got slick, because at that time, you know, they had these, in the bathroom, the tubs that sit up, you know, they wasn't flat down. He went and got up behind the tub, and she couldn't get him. She probably got out and drug him out, but anyway, she was pretty stiff, and you learned to respect your elders.
But it sounds as though she was pretty special in your life, though.
Very much so. Very much so. Every day I would go by and see her, you know, when I got grown, yes.
Okay. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have one sister named Peggy, Peggy Hollie. She was adopted when I was about 14 or 15 years old.
What schools did you attend in Toledo?
I attended several. I went to grade school at Roosevelt, which is now Martin Luther King School, and I went to Robertson Junior High, and I went to Maycomber High School.
Okay, good.
Those are schools I attended, and I was out to TU for a while.
TU. Now, I indicated in my introduction that you were an outstanding student athlete. What sports did you play in high school?
I played basketball and football. You know, I look at now, when we were playing, coming along, I might, as a kid, you know, I see all of this, the parents' involvement and all this equipment they got, and each one of us we'd have a little team, and they came by what school like you went to. Like I went to Roosevelt, down the street was a Washington school, and we had a ball field, they had a team and all that. Each one of us might have a cleat, another might have a helmet, another might have some shoulder pads. And that's how, and nobody taught us, and don't ask me how we got together to play. But every Thanksgiving even, we would have at Washington School and Roosevelt, we'd have at Scott High School field, we would go out there and play on their field, you know, like we playing a Thanksgiving game.
But everybody had a good time, though.
Everybody had a good time, yeah.
You know, I was looking through some of the old newspaper clippings, and you were in the paper quite a bit. Are there any moments in your athletic career that sort of come to mind that you can think of?
Well, in football, I can think of a time we went down to play Canton-Timpkin, which was down in Canton, Ohio. Mm-hmm. And Canton-Timpkin had a little league in, and they were supposed to be bad team, and we went down to play them, and we were supposed to lose that game, okay? And I can remember we stopped them. This guy caught a pass, and he ran about 90-some yards, and I caught him on about the 5-yard line. We had a quarterback named Russ Osborne at the time, and we got in a huddle, and he was talking and saying, look, guys, we got to really get together. We all put our hands together. It seemed like everybody was on the same page. I mean, it was like something had struck in that line. We knocked everything down the other way for a touchdown. On that one play, it just seemed like a lightning just hit the whole thing, and we leveled everybody. We went about 90-some yards the other way.
Wow.
Yeah, that has never happened to me before.
Well, that's impressive.
Yes,
that is
it's
impressive.
almost like I could say where people kind of get spiritual up into something.
Sure.
It was almost like a spiritual thing that just hit in there, and it seemed like we were all on the same page.
You know, looking at some of the old photographs, I sense it appears that there were few African-American players, especially on the basketball team. As you were growing up, did you ever sense racism?
Oh, that was in the picture all the time. Yes, you just gotta know. You have to know how to deal with it, you know. And yes, we at Maycomber was predominantly completely white school. There was about 900 kids at the time, boys, and there was about 50 blacks. And most of those blacks was playing some kind of sports with us, you know.
Okay.
But yes, it was there. I can recall when I was a senior, and they was gearing me for play quarterback that year. We were supposed to have a dynamite team, and we got a coach that came in to be the trainer. Mm-hmm. Our coach was drilling us, but it was a good friend of his, and he decided to change the whole program. We were working out in a little gym with the players and what we were going to be doing, and they changed the whole program. They got a guy playing quarterback who was about 200-some pounds, and you know that just don't do right for a quarterback, and it hurt the team.
Sure.
The team was looking forward to that, you know.
Okay.
I was looking forward to it myself.
But you made contributions otherwise in
yes.
different ways.
Oh yes, oh yeah. I played offense and defense all the time. You know, either playing halfback or.
Let's talk about church. Was church an important part of your upbringing?
Yeah, it was very much so. I've been a member of St. Philip's Evangelical Lutheran Church since I was 3 years old, and I'm 7-0 now.
Okay.
So you know that it played a great importance in my life. I'm one I'm chairman of the elders with St. Philip's at the present time. And I've been in just about every chair as the chairman of the church and this and that. And it has played God has always been in my life.
Sure, good.
And I think I've had a blessed life. And in respect to looking back over my whole life and living my life, I had a blessed life.
Do you have any regrets?
No, not really. No regrets. We have actions that we have to take to do things, you know. And sometimes you look like you're in a hole, but, you know, if you believe in God, somehow, some way, He works His thing. And sometimes things happen that I know I seem to be like in trouble in, and it seems like just the gates open up, and you say, well, how did this? And then I know.
Sure.
I would know, you know.
Okay, Mike, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about your musical career.
Okay.
You're known by many in the community because of your outstanding skills as a drummer. Was that the first instrument that you ever played?
No, I played when I was a kid. My grandmother started me at 7 years old playing the piano. Everybody had to play the piano, had to do something.
Okay.
And so she wanted me to have some type of musical skills. So I had Mrs. Hawkins that I studied under first, and I loved her very much. And then I had Mrs. Shealy, which I liked just as well. And Mrs. Hawkins passed on. Then I went to Mrs. Shealy, and I think she is still living right now.
So you played piano for about how many years?
I played piano from about 7 years old to probably up to about 13 years old, and did recitals and stuff and worked at the piano. Okay. But I really I hadn't thought about playing drums, really. But what happened was, when I was about 14 or 15, a club called Tate's here in Toledo. A lot of old timers know this club. It was kind of getting back in the era of times, you know. And Sundays they would have where the young people, 15, 16, you know, 17-year-old, could come in, and they have popcorn and potato chips, and they have more or less the floor show, the band there and singers and that. And I was really intrigued by the drummer. And I liked, his name was Swing Lee. Swing Lewis, his name was Lewis Lee, but they called him Swing Lee. I liked the way his character was with them drums, and he seemed to be able to make them talk, make them do what he wanted to do, and I really enjoyed that. And I said, that's what I'm gonna play, is drums. And my grandmother and my mother almost killed me, because when I graduated from high school and they gave me some money, they gave me about $400 and something, and I went and bought the drums. Matter of fact, the same drums that I got right now. A lot of guys buy 10 or 15 sets. I still got the set that I had when I was around 18 years old.
So the same set you bought, you originally purchased, you still have today?
I still have them today. Wow. And I take care of them. They're older now, and the skins and the wood material in them, you got to really maintain them, because you can't let them sit out in the cold weather, let them be someplace that stuff starts to deteriorate quick.
But let me get this straight. You purchased the drums, although you couldn't play them.
I purchased the drums, I couldn't play them, and my grandmother and my mother was getting ready to say, boy, what are you doing? You are out of your mind. You know you're not going to play them drums. I said, I'm playing these drums.
So how did you ultimately learn to play them?
I went to Bach Conservatory. I wanted to, learn the right way. And I'd watched this guy, like I told you, Swing Lee, and I went to Bach Conservatory, and that was on Jefferson Avenue. They are no longer here. But I learned drums down there and had a class, and I was taught individually. I can't remember the person's name, and I was down there a good almost 2 years. And the gentleman there said, well, he had taught me everything. I was learning about the paradiddles and radical cues and all these different things, 26 rudiments that you learn how to play and be involved in. And he told me, well, I know you want to learn jazz drumming. So he said, I know a fellow that he's a detective with the police department that would, I can contact him and see would he take you on. And so the guy called me, and I did. He come over the house and showed me some things, and I worked with him for a good about 8 months. And he said, well, I showed you everything I know, so there I was, you know.
Wow.
But anyway, then Mr. McDaniels, we had a Douglas Center, which is I think it was in the 300 block of Pinewood, and we kind of met down there and started to form a band, you know. I think it was about 5 or 6 of us in this band, you know. And Charles McDaniels and I have been together off and on throughout my music career. I was probably playing with him about 5 or 6 years, and then I ventured off on my own and had my own group.
But you also became good friends with his brother, Leroy. Is that
yes,
correct?
me and Leroy was running buddies. Matter of fact, Leroy was working, I think, in the insurance business, and I got him on a Western Southern Insurance Company, and we was playing together then, you know. We would play weddings and fraternities and sororities and all this type of thing, and we'd play at the Elks and all. We played all around a lot of different places. I can't name them all right now, but Leroy and I always kind of chummed up and ran together. Matter of fact, Charles was kind of like the godfather of us, trying to keep us straight at the time, you know. But we were just having fun as young people. But like saying, I got him a job at Western Southern, and he worked there about 10 years, and he went to Allstate Insurance Company, and he got me a job at Allstate.
Okay.
And I was there about 22 years, and Leroy passed on during that time that I was there. I really miss him a great deal.
Sounds like you were very close.
Yeah, we were good, very close.
Let me go back to Swing Lee real quickly. Okay. How did you convince him to train you?
He didn't want to. You know, I've been in the insurance business for a while, so I convinced him by kind of like a sales talk. When we were at a club, I walked in there, and he was there sitting in with this band called Anglers. And after he came down off the set, he was outdoors, and I said, you know, I've been watching you play, and you really know how to play those drums. And I asked him about could I take lessons from him. He said, well, you know, I haven't. It's been years and years I give anybody lessons. I really don't want to get in it. You know. I convinced him to let me come over his house. So he said, okay, come on over. So that next Saturday I went over there, and I was showing him some things that I knew and was doing and stuff, and he looked at it. And so he gave me some things to do, and I was supposed to be back the next week, and I studied and worked on that all week long. I was working 3 or 4 hours after I came from work, you know, and practicing. And when I came back, I was running it so smooth that we kind of got into some things, and he started showing me some stuff that he hadn't did in a long time. You know, sometimes you be doing things and you forget about stuff that you've done. And so from there, he was charging me $5 a half an hour, and our half an hour went to 3 and 4 hours at a time. Really? I mean, we really got deep into it. So he looked forward to me coming by the house, and he helped me a great deal in playing with, you know, getting jobs with other people, you know. Okay. And from that, I kind of went off on my own and got my first job, you know, and I got a guy in Detroit to play piano, which was Eddie Abrams, and everybody in Toledo knows Eddie Abrams. He was a jazz pianist. And I had a fella named Little Diz, which was a trumpet player, and he sounded like Dizzy Gillespie. Wow. And that's where my group started. When I started, first job was at Savoy Lounge. Okay. So I kind of went into the nightclub work, you know, at that time.
Okay, let's talk about some of the bands that you played with, or you organized. So what was the first band that you organized?
This was the first band I'm talking about at Savoy Lounge that I organized. Okay. And I went from there that I had several different people play with me. I more or less got into organ group, where we had an organ, saxophone, and guitar and drums. Okay. We did a lot of floor shows around Toledo, and one of the main spots I played was about 12 years at the Green Light. Okay. And we had that was one of the main places. I played a lot of sororities and fraternities and Masonics. We did a lot of that. Okay. working different. We was busy all for 30-some years. I was busy playing.
Well, let's go back. So was that the group, Mike Hollie and the Soul Merchants?
Yes.
What group is that, and who are members of that group?
That was the group that played in the nightclubs,
Okay.
Mike Hollie and Soul Merchants, and a fella named Lawrence Pee Wee Glover, and they called him Pee Wee Glover, and Boots Clanton Ellis, and he was called Boots Ellis.
Okay.
Now Ellis sounded like Jimmy Smith, and Pee Wee Glover was one of the baddest saxophone players in this area, this territory, with him and Harold Lindsay, which is another fellow that played someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
They was about top in the music world so far as saxophone players was.
Okay.
And I had Alfred Smith, which was a guitar player. He played with me.
Okay.
I had a 4-man group, but we played everything. I mean, we could play polka, rock and roll, blues, jazz, whatever needed to be done. It was a band that played a lot of shows. We played a lot of shows coming out of Cleveland, Detroit, and Chicago. And they wanted to know, could you read, you know? Frankly, after we was playing with them a while, they would want to know who's playing, you know, especially in the nightclubs, you know, because
Okay.
people coming, entertainers do not want to be misused in any way when they get up on that stage, so they want to know who's backing them up. If we were backing them up, they were fine with it, you know. And that's just the way it was. I'm not trying to be funny about it.
Any famous groups that I would know that you would have backed up, like the Temptations or any groups like that?
Yeah, we played along with the Temptation on a show up at the Palindrome. We played along with Jimmy Smith. Matter of fact, this was at the World Theater, which is no longer, which used to be on Dorr Street. He was at the World Theater, and we was to come on before him. And we did, and he had to come up behind the stage because the stuff we were playing, see, Boots sounded like Smith already, and he demanded that we have 2 Leslie speakers there, you know. So he actually played on my organ because I think they were on their way to Detroit.
Okay.
So he had to go to work. I think he thought he would come by and just blase and keep going. But he was enjoying it. He enjoyed himself. Yeah.
Okay. So you had your band together for about 35 years.
Yeah.
Were you guys ever out of work, or was there constant work for you?
We had constant work. You know, out of nightclubs. Out of all the bands, when times got rough, like when Jeep or General Motors, you know, plants was closed, was laying off and stuff, we still had, at the Green Light that was more or less like a black and tan club, you know. Especially on Friday nights, it'd be more or less, so you could see predominantly more or less more whites in there. Mm-hmm. And on Saturdays, it'd be predominantly more or less more blacks in there.
Okay.
And we played on a Sunday too, so usually Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday we would be playing.
I know that 2 of your former teammates or bandmates have passed on.
Correct.
How does that make you feel?
Sad, very sad. We hadn't played together probably in the last 15 years because Glover decided to go. One day he came to me, he called me on a Monday. He said, I got to talk to you. And he decided, he had went to church with his wife, and he decided that he was going to be in church and he was not going to play in the secular world anymore. Mm-hmm. Well, that was really a big hurt because he was major stay for me so far as the music is concerned. And I told him, I said, well, if the Lord pulled you in, I am not the one that's going to be saying anything against that, and I would like for you to do that, and I hope everything works out. And he did. And pretty much after that, that's when I stopped. So, I mean, I pulled the organ home, and I pretty much just kind of stopped at that time. Now, I've been playing after that. And
Sure.
then me and Charles McDaniels we started doing some things together. I was playing a while with one of the fellas, Jerry DePrisco, and he has head of DePrisco Central High School at that time. He was the head of their music department. He asked me to come and do some one-nighters, and we were saying, it's going to be once a month. We'll probably play at a wedding or at one of the country clubs or something. So it started out like once a month, because I told him I really didn't want to do this. This thing got to be every week. Because as you play at different places, you pick up things. People want you to things and different things that they have, and they've been looking for a band, and naturally they take your name down and give you a call, so you wind up almost every week you're playing.
Wow.
And I didn't want to do that every week.
Kept you pretty busy then.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And I didn't want to be that busy.
Let me go back. When Lawrence Glover passed away, you attended his funeral.
Yes.
What was that funeral like?
Well, not only did I attend, I was a part of the funeral. I worked very closely. Me and the family, both families, are very close. They almost figured me out as a father, you know, image, and I helped them. They said they wanted music at that homegoing. And so I contacted the musicians, and we must have had about 50-some musicians around, horns and saxophones and trumpets and what have you, and drummers and all this. That was there. They liked Glover. Glover was very well known in the city of Toledo by the music world, and so they liked him a great deal. And that funeral went from 11 o'clock to 3 is when they was taking him out in the casket. Behind him, they were playing Amen. All these horns, and they was marching. You think he was in New Orleans or St. Louis or someplace. That they really, he had really a beautiful home.
Wow.
The pastor at the time was kind of worried about whether or not, you know, that the musicians were going to take over, but we didn't take over anything. And I explained to him, I said, you know, and he thought maybe he was going to get into a rock and roll and jazz thing. So I had to explain to him and the church. I said, you know, we play rock and roll, blues, and jazz, and all these different things. We also play spirituals.
Okay.
And that's where we came from.
In fact, let me ask you about that. You because you had to make a transition from secular music to religious music. Was that a tough transition to make?
Hardest thing I had to do in the world. I'm not kidding. I had a problem for a good 10 years because my pastor, I'm a Lutheran, St. Philip's Lutheran Church, and my pastor said, why don't you bring the drums in and play them? And I said, no way, I'm not doing that one. No, and then too, you know, Lutherans don't have too many instruments besides a piano.
Sure.
But nowadays in the Lutheran churches, because they got a lot of Spanish churches and all this, and they play a different brand of music. They play the brand of music of us, what they do in Mexican or Spanish. They play their brand. I guess it's, I mean, I don't know all the particulars to it, but that's what they play because I've seen it.
Sure.
I've seen where the pastors, I think 40 of them, of Lutheran pastors went over in Africa, and they went along with the drums and the stuff like that, and they would talk about how grateful they was and how things become, you know. I still had a problem with this, but it took me some time, and I was talking to Boots because Boots was at another church playing. He said, I'm having a problem trying to play spirituals. You're trying to say, well, I don't want to get this circular stuff mixed up with what's happening in church, but you come to find out you're playing pretty much the same thing.
Okay.
You're playing pretty much, it's just how you feel about it, and it all comes from in the mind.
Well, now, was it, so it was just you, but was the congregation in the church accepting of?
They enjoyed it. They enjoyed it. When I didn't play, and I don't play, they, how come you're not on them drums? Because they be sitting there a lot of them. They enjoyed it very much. They liked it.
Okay.
Yeah, they liked it very much.
But you have now successfully made the transition.
Yes, I can. We do. A matter of fact, in the group with Charles and we play now, we do predominantly spiritual type things now.
Okay, okay. Let me go back to Mr. McDaniels. Did you and he at some point play live radio?
Yeah, we did a radio station downtown where we played for weeks, you know, a month, something like that. Yes, we did. He probably remember a lot more than I can about it, but I remember we were doing it, you know.
So in terms of live radio, I mean, you would take your instruments
We
and
take our
actually
instrument.
play.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So if you made a mistake,
Yeah.
you just played right through it?
Just played right through it. We didn't make too many mistakes.
Of course you didn't. Of course you didn't.
Except we would, see the thing of it was, we were playing with one another for a while that we could cover up or, you know, anything that somebody might have happened, we could blend the music right in to make sure it's okay.
Okay, but is that same concept true? Does it hold true when you played with a person for 35 years?
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. It very much so holds true. Where if you've been playing that long, even in learning new songs, a lot of things will just blend right in from what you've been doing. Okay, and we knew one another back and forth so well that we could cover up if something happened. Yes. Okay. Yes. And that's the professionalism of being able to, because if you're not professional in doing this, you can really mess up,
Sure.
you know.
Sure.
But being professional as everybody was involved, that we could take care of that and keep going.
Okay. You know, speaking of professionalism, I know that you learned to read music at an early age.
Yeah.
How important is it for a musician to be able to read music?
Oh, it's very important, especially if you're going to be playing with big bands. And if you're going to be playing where they have shows and stuff, and they bring a sheet up there for you to play, that's very important. You know, like that at the Art Museum, at Peristyle, at the Art Museum, or some of those Stranahan's, something like that, or they have a show come in, the ebony things, they need some musicians to play with them. It's very important.
Let me go back just a little bit. I know that you came of age during a time in our history when there was tension in terms of race relations between African Americans and whites. In Toledo, did African American and white musicians play together?
Yeah, we actually, the musicians didn't have any problem. There was no problem, at least as far as I'm concerned. I played with quite a few white musicians, you know, and I think the music kind of brought us together. It was about the music that brought us together, and there was not a problem. I mean, they'd have jam sessions that come in, we go to their jam sessions, they come to our jam sessions, and no problem.
Let me ask you a couple questions then, shift gears a little bit, and ask you about Art Tatum. I know that Art Tatum had left town by the time you came of age.
Right.
But what comes to your mind when you think about the gift that Art Tatum had?
Well, Art Tatum had a magnificent gift with the keyboard that he could really move his fingers at a phenomenal amount of speed, you know, and he had a lot of soul in him as to what he was doing. And it just carried out to other people could understand what he was doing too, you know.
Sure, sure.
So that was I think a big feature. Now he might have another idea in that, but that's he really had the feeling there up here,
Okay.
and that's a gift that he had, you know.
Do you think he was before his time?
He probably was, yeah. I think he probably was, you know.
Okay.
Nobody was playing like that at that time, you know.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your life as your insurance life.
Okay.
What kind of companies did you work for, and what did you do?
I have had in my lifetime major companies that I worked for, three. I only worked for 3 companies in my life. I mean, when I was in the marketplace working, I'm not talking about as I'm retired right now. But I worked for Merrill Lynch, New York Stock Exchange, for 5 years. And you talk about the color thing there, that became that, not really from those people, but just up of what's happening in the marketplace. And I completed everything I could do there so far. I took care and handled from the toilet paper to the light bulbs. I knew when people was going on vacation, I was responsible for taking their place on teletype op machines where we, you know, the quotes come in or the orders go out that day. I could do all that, but when it came time for that promotion, it didn't happen. And I decided to say, well, it's time for me to move on. And I wound up with contacting the employment office, Ohio Employment Office, okay, and a fellow named Harold Garner was the head of that at the time, and he was responsible for me talking with Western and Southern Insurance Company.
Okay.
And at that time, they were looking for blacks because they wanted to work in the black community. So I was with them for 16 years. I made it to associate manager with them. I made all kind of trips and awards, everything they had. I got trophies and stuff like that. Then, as I told you before, Leroy went was at Allstate So he had talked to the guy and told him about me. The manager contacted me and offered me a contract that I really could not refuse.
Okay.
I could not refuse. So I wound up with Allstate for 22 years, and I traveled the world with them, and I sold a lot of people insurance and did a lot of investments with people.
So then you were not just a full-time musician. You were also into the insurance business.
That's correct.
While maintaining the family as well.
That is correct.
Okay. How did you manage to avoid some of the pitfalls of being a musician and being on the road, some of the temptations that others have fallen prey to?
Well, I guess there's all type of temptations and stuff on the road. You know, first of all, in that era of time, when I was coming along, drugs was prevalent in the musicians, not in the marketplace like now. You know, all the kids out here on all kind of beans and pills and shots and whatever. It was mainly in the industry of music, you know, where the musicians were saying, hey, I feel better when I play. Well, that was not my cup of tea. And I never, unless it was by the doctor giving me a prescription, other than that, it never fazed me, because my parents talked to me, and they was quite thorough on that, and say, when you put your hand in the fire, it's going to get burned, you know. And I can recall going back to some of the things that they would put me through. And one of the things I recall that they put me through was the fact that I had let, at that time, your mother would wash your clothes. And I made a mistake and left some dirty pictures and a switchblade, which I knew I wasn't supposed to have, right? I wasn't supposed to have this switchblade. All the cats around had switchblades, right? And they would hit the button and go, we ain't gonna do nothing with them, but we big time, you know. And she went to wash my clothes, and they were in my overalls. You thought I had killed 25 people. I had blew up the Empire State Building. Oh, they went off on me. My grandmother, my father, my mother, they went off their point and said, boy, you going to CSI. And they called in, they had a friend, which I didn't know at the time. They called in this policeman. They had a date set for the policeman to come. He came in, and he had went to our church, you know. He was a member of the church. But I didn't know what had happened. He came in, you know, pulled up in the police car and came in the house. Now, they set all this up, you understand? I did not know what was going on, but I was scared as I don't know what. They set this up, and he came in, and he would say, well, boy, what's kind of problem I understand you having here? And they went off.
How old were you then?
I was about 14, 15 years old.
Okay.
And they went off on me, you know. And he said, well, now I'll tell you what, well, that's okay, well, we're going to see about taking him down. And you ready to go? And I really didn't want to go, you know. And he said, I'll tell you what do you think if I give him one more chance? And he said, you think you could stand another chance? You know, nobody was laughing. Everybody was serious and for real here. But it just goes to show you, as parents, how far they was willing to go to make me understand this is not what you're supposed to be about and what you're supposed to be doing. You know. And today I can talk about it and respect that, you know, what had happened during that period of time, and a lot of different other things that happened to me that I could talk about. Another one I can remember very, very much so is I was 16 years old, and they had bought me a car, and I was supposed to be in at 9:30 during the week, and at 11 o'clock, unless I had on the weekend, unless I was going someplace. Well, I had this car on this particular night. I can recall that I was supposed to have been in the house by 11:30. I came to the house, and I knew I was late. It was about 20 minutes till 12. The house was dark, and I got up to the front door. Now, I know this house very well, because the fact is I had to clean the house every Saturday. I had to run sweepers. I had to mop floors, wax floors, so I know the steps. I had to run the sweep over there. And what happened was I got on the front porch and took off my shoes. I said, I got to get in this house with my mother not seeing me, right? It took me 10 minutes to open the door, and right at the front of the door was a big grate, one of these steel grates they had at the time for air vent thing. So I got around there, and I got on my knees, and I crawled. And I got to the steps. And when I got to the steps, one would say, and I'd back off, you know. And I had to go around another way, and it took me about 20 minutes to get up the steps, you know. You know where my mother was? She was sitting down there in the dark, in the chair, watching me, and I thought I was getting ready to make a beeline for my room. She said, Michael, put the keys on the, on the mantle. But I'm just saying, these are the type of things that, hey, you know, kids now this was 11:30, now these kids stay out today all night long. But she was concerned to say, hey, you be in here. This is where you're supposed to be at this time. Sure. I mean, the control and very important as to, you know, knowing where your kids are will stop a lot of things that's happening in the marketplace right now.
It sounds as if you were definitely loved and had good discipline as a child.
Very much so.
Okay, Mike, as we begin to wrap up here, two last quick questions. You can answer these in any sequence that you want. When you pass on, how do you want to be remembered as a musician? One question. And how do you want your children and your grandchildren to remember you?
Well, let me say this. I'll talk about my children and my grandchildren because I had a good grandfather. and I can remember him. I can remember him taking me down to the show during the week, and we'd go across and get hot dogs. He'd go to sleep in the show. I can remember him taking me to the baseball games in Detroit. You know, you got to be involved in your kids, you know. Mm-hmm. And I am very much involved in taking the little ones, whatever, the grandkids, the great-grandkids, whatever, to do things. And I think that it will speak for itself. I don't think I have to do anything special as long as I've made myself available and been a part of them and very much interested. And I'm very much interested in each one of my kids. Okay. And I call them and talk to them. I call and talk to my grandsons. Make sure they're on the right, doing what they're supposed to be doing. At least let them know that I'm looking for them. I'm interested in what they're about. And I think this is what is important today in the marketplace, that people don't be interested in the young fellas, especially, that's coming up. So they wind up in the whatever, and they're thinking making quick money. Okay. And they wind up with all this gold and stuff. They wind up with this car, but then they wind up 6 months later, they don't have none of that, and they're in jail. Okay. Why are they in jail? Okay. They're in jail because they're doing things not like they should be doing to make the proper money, so therefore they're not wasting money and throwing stuff away. Sure, sure. So I think that so far as how I would be perceived, I think I would be perceived well. Okay. And you asked the question of...
How do you want to be remembered as a musician?
How I want to be remembered as a musician? I think I would like to be remembered that I stood my own, and I love music, and I love to play, and that I love music, and they can take it from there. Okay, it was a pleasure for me to play, you know, and I enjoy it very much. And I'm not trying to create no special thing, you know. I think I probably could have, if earlier in life, pursued maybe more of the major stuff like some of the, you know, the major musicians, but because I had a pretty solid group, and they was really uptight. They really played some good music, you know. Okay, okay. But we was kind of like, with my business in Toledo, I didn't pursue. We had a few jobs outside of Toledo, but I like it here.
Okay. Mr. Hollie, again, it sounds as if, well, I know you've had a wonderful and distinguished career, and thanks ever so much for agreeing to come in for this interview and for participating in this project.
Well, you're quite welcome. I enjoyed this very much, and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
you.